He paid for a relaxing float in a sensory deprivation tank, came down with a stomach virus mid-session, and woke up demanding to be let out. To find out exactly what you're imagining happened. The facility wants $12,000. He's hired a lawyer to argue it might not have even been him. 4 stories today, starting with the messiest legal defense you'll hear all week. He booked a sensory deprivation float session without realizing he'd already caught a stomach bug. Partway through, what he assumed were strange sensory hallucinations turned out to be a 103-degree fever, and he drifted off inside the tank. He woke up to an overwhelming smell, banged to be let out immediately, and discovered he'd had a serious accident inside the enclosed tank while unconscious. Understandably traumatic on its own. But then the facility informed him they couldn't safely sanitize the tank and would need to replace it entirely at a cost of $8,000. 5 months later, he posted an update. The facility was now asking for $12,500, well above the original estimate. He'd hired an attorney, and their argument, roughly summarized, was that since he'd been asleep at the time, there was no way to definitively prove it was actually him, floating the theory that an employee might have tampered with the tank, or that a promotional pancake and sushi lunch the facility hosted that day might have been the real culprit behind a sudden stomach illness. His legal fees, by his own admission, were quickly approaching the cost of the tank itself, and he was hoping to get the facility to cover those too. 2 years later, in an unrelated post to a plumbing forum, the same person casually mentioned their 18-month-old having a bathroom accident in the home tub, asking how to keep the pipes from smelling afterward. One commenter summed up the entire saga perfectly. Like father, like son. It's genuinely hard to overstate how large a leap that legal defense really is, arguing essentially that some unnamed intruder crept into a private, occupied tank, caused the exact same incident, then quietly slipped back out unnoticed. And from the facility side, investing tens of thousands of dollars into specialized equipment only to have a customer both damage it and threaten legal action over the cleanup cost is its own special kind of frustrating. That story is gross, but ultimately harmless. This next one is a lot harder to sit through. A story about a family that chose to protect the wrong person. While her mother, stepfather, and 2 younger siblings went camping, she stayed home to house sit and take care of the family's animals, since work kept her from joining the trip. Her stepfather had recently installed several new outdoor security cameras, so when her boyfriend came to stay with her that night, neither of them thought anything of the setup, until he noticed a cable running from outside her bedroom window into her room, powered by what turned out to be a covert spy camera power adapter. Her relationship with her stepfather, who had been part of her life since she was 8, had never been especially close, and she'd written off a number of uncomfortable comments over the years simply because he was family. This was different. The camera was angled directly at her bedroom, with a full view of the space she changed in, and it had an SD card installed. There was no accidental explanation that held up under scrutiny. She and her boyfriend reviewed the footage themselves and went to the police. Filing a report and turning over the camera and card, officers described it as a serious offense. In the days that followed, she searched the rest of the house for any additional hidden devices and arranged to tell her mother the full story away from the home, with her aunt present for support. A year later, she confirmed what many had feared. The camera had recorded intimate moments between her and her boyfriend, footage that had been actively streamed to her stepfather's phone in real time. She'd initially hesitated to pursue the police report fully, in part because her mother had used her college fund as leverage to discourage her from doing so. To this day, most of her family has continued to stand by her stepfather. Her mother went silent on her for an entire week when the situation first came to light. No calls, no check-ins, and has continued avoiding the subject ever since, choosing instead to remain in the marriage. She's since become engaged to the boyfriend who first discovered the camera, finished her degree, and started a new career. Her mother, she's decided, will not be invited to the wedding. She's planning to move across the country, largely to put real distance between herself and a family that chose loyalty to her stepfather over protecting her. If she could go back, she says, she wouldn't hesitate on the police report the way she once did. That's a hard story to sit with. Here's something almost absurd by comparison. A grieving widow asked to prove in writing that she isn't a murderer. She woke up one morning to find her husband had died in his sleep unexpectedly at 49. She was partway through teacher training at the time, openly discussing her grief with colleagues, including the meaning behind a memorial tattoo on her neck bearing his last written words to her. One day, with no advance warning, she was pulled into a private meeting and told that because of how sudden and young his death had been, and because she had overshared about it at work, the school wanted to see a formal letter from police confirming she'd been cleared of any wrongdoing in his death. Stunned and upset, she refused to continue the conversation without HR present to document it. A staff member followed her out to the car park afterward, repeatedly asking her not to leave upset, even as she explained she wasn't in a state to keep talking. Only 3 weeks into the course, she was terrified the school was looking for any reason to remove her. 9 months later, she posted an update. With her union's involvement, the school eventually admitted fault, though the written apology amounted to little more than, "Sorry if your feelings were hurt," language she didn't consider a real apology at all. Because she hadn't been enrolled long enough for further formal action, an apology was ultimately all that came of it. She left the program, filed an official complaint pushing for broader sensitivity training, and took a year off before restarting her teacher training somewhere that, in her words, wouldn't ask her to prove she wasn't a murderer. It's worth pointing out how little sense the actual request made on its own terms. No police department issues a formal letter clearing a private citizen of suspicion in a case with no charges and no investigation to begin with. The simplest available evidence that nothing was wrong was already sitting in plain view the entire time. She wasn't under arrest, and she was still showing up to class. Last one for today. This one's smaller in scale, but the kind of discovery that's hard to unknow once you've seen it. Her own laptop had broken right in the middle of summer coursework, so she borrowed her 23-year-old boyfriend's laptop overnight to finish a paper. While procrastinating in another tab, a Facebook message notification popped up. Without thinking much of it, she clicked over and immediately realized the account wasn't hers. The message, from his brother, read, "Dude, where's horse teeth at? You're up late." She has noticeably imperfect teeth, and the nickname clearly wasn't a stretch to place. She scrolled further than she probably should have. Mixed in among genuinely warm things he'd said about her, that she was amazing, fun, that he'd never cheat, was a long thread where his brother pushed him toward hooking up with a coworker, punctuated by his boyfriend calling her things like no boobs, rat's nest hair, and avocado nose, and admitting he sometimes missed the more conventionally built women he dated in high school, all while his brother egged the conversation on. She'd made peace with her own appearance long before that night, or thought she had. Reading it in his own words, about her specifically, unraveled that piece fast. She wrestled with whether to say anything at all, worried about how devastated he'd be to know she'd seen it, but ultimately felt she couldn't simply carry it silently either. The next day, she posted an update. She'd broken up with him. He'd apologized and insisted he hadn't meant any of it. But, as she put it herself, some things can't be unheard once they've been said. She described herself as someone who'd always kept relationships at arm's length before him, specifically to avoid getting hurt this badly. And this was the exact outcome she'd spent years trying to protect herself from. As more than one person pointed out afterward, Genuinely secure, respectful partners simply don't talk about the people they love that way behind their backs, brother or not. 4 very different situations. One absurd, one genuinely disturbing, one almost comically bureaucratic, and one quietly heartbreaking. Which one stuck with you the most? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe for a new story every day. See you tomorrow.